In Greyhawk, history can matter if you want it to, and I want to talk about it today on Greyhawk Grognard. So a lot of D&D settings have histories. They talk about when this kingdom was founded and when this uh, mage turned into a lich, that kind of thing. But Greyhawk has a particularly interesting history that's evolved over the years, starting off with Gary and moving into other authors. And if you choose to make it matter, then you can really enrich your Greyhawk campaign. And obviously, you don't have to do this. You could just make stuff up on the fly. Uh, it if you choose. But I think personally, I really enjoy the idea that I am investing my campaign with some of the lore, the deep lore, the rich lore that has developed over the last 40, 50 years. And I'm tying that into my game, and that way my game feels more real, feels more alive because it's got those ties into the setting. And this can work on a couple of different levels. And I want to give you an example for each one. For example, you can do characters, you can do places, and you can do items like magic items. So let's start with people. Now, let's say you've got a vampire, right? Standard thing. Okay, vampire, he's got a lair. Boom, the adventurers are going to fight. Great. But what if you link that vampire into some historical event? And I'm thinking here about the turmoil between crowns, which happened in the Great Kingdom in 436. I'm sorry, 437 Common Year, and basically that's when the House of Nalax uh, destroyed the House of Rax, which was the Overking house, and destroyed all of his relatives and everything, and assassinated them. And then the House of Nalax, which was Ivid's house, ascends to the throne, to the Malachite throne. So you've got this big event that happened, and this is happening maybe 140 years before, right? So before the current year. And so you've got this big event, and now you want to have a vampire. What if that vampire is one of the slain descendants of House Rax? What if he actually has a claim to the Malachite throne? Or maybe he's just consumed with vengeance against the house of Nalax, against Ivid, because Ivid's family killed his family. So now, remember what we talked about when I talked about the Ravenloft stuff, where you give each villain a compulsion and a curse? This could be his compulsion. He is a product of the turmoil between crowns, and for the last 140 years, he has been plotting and scheming to take down the House of Nalax, to kill Ivid. But Ivid is way too powerful, obviously, and so his parents, his fathers, and so forth. But what if you have this vampire skulking around the Great Kingdom or outside the Great Kingdom, trying to just undermine the Overking? Now you've got history woven into this tragic story of this vampire who didn't ask to be made into this evil being, but now you have evil fighting evil. What do you do? What's the moral? What's the moral case here? The PCs, are they going to fight the vampire and maybe help Ivid, House Nalax? You got this whole dilemma just from rooting this one NPC into a historical event. And I think that's great. You can do that with tons of different things. It doesn't have to be vampires that looking at events 140 years ago. There are plenty of more recent events that you can tie an NPC to that give them a little backstory, give them a little grounding in the setting. Maybe you were at this battle, or maybe the NPC was present at this event, or whatever. You could tie that into the setting, and that gives them a little bit more richness and flavor. Hi, everybody. Please help me keep Greyhawk alive by liking this video and subscribing. It really does help. You can also become a member of the channel or support me on Patreon and get early access to my videos, exclusive content, free or at-cost copies of my Greyheim Adventures modules, and more. Thanks, and now back to the show. So now let's turn our attention to places. This is a place. This is where the history aspect can really shine, because you've got a never ending need for ruins in Dungeons and Dragons, right? You always need more ruins, more dungeons, more places for the PCs to go. And let's just pick one. In 359 Common Year or thereabouts, the Nyrond annexes the Theocracy of the Pale and burns the capital Wintershiven to the ground. It's later rebuilt about 60 miles north, two hexes on this map behind me. Uh, there. Uh, to but the ruins of the old city have to still be there, right? So if you're looking for some ruins, what if there are still underground ruins in the old site of Wintershiven? What if they're where the old capital was? There could be all kinds of artifacts of Foltis that survived the destruction of the city. There could be all kinds of different things going on there. But now you have the underground ruins of an entire city, cellars and palaces and dungeons and stuff, all just sitting there. Obviously, the city itself, there's almost nothing left on the surface, but there could be all kinds of things below. The sewers, all that is just waiting for you. Rather than just plunking down some random, okay, here's a random dungeon out in the wilderness. No, now you have tied it to the history of the setting. You have given it a reason to be there. This was the old capital of the Pale. And, yeah, I'm sure it's been picked over by some people, but there's got to be secret places and hidden places that never were disturbed that the PCs could go in. Maybe they find a map that dates back to before 359 that shows the location of Wintershiven where it used to be. That could give them that could give them the way in. Maybe they see a drawing of the city itself, mapping out, okay, here's where the palace was. This was the merchant's quarter. This was that. And that could give them clues to where they should start looking in this area for ways to get into the underground portions of the city. There's all kinds of ways you can do that. But now, instead of just plunking some random place down, you're tying it into the setting. You're giving it a reason to be there. And that makes it so much more believable. It also gives you, now you have a reason to give out maps, as treasure. Maybe they find maybe the PCs find an old treasure map, an old map showing it where it was. Now you've given that map a reason to be there. It just all starts snowballing until you have this wonderfully rich, historically based dungeon that you can have your players explore. And to me, that's a lot more satisfying than just having some random dungeon out in the wilderness. And now let's talk about things, right? Magic items. Let's say you've got a magic sword, and it's maybe a frost brand or something, some pretty hefty magic sword. Your players find out, oh great, we have this sword. What if though you tied it back into the setting, into the history of the setting? It's not just any frost brand sword. This is the sword that was wielded by the Kaolandish king Tavish III at the siege of Westkeep, where he was slain, and his the sword was buried with him, but then it was lost track of. Now you have a history for that sword. It's not just any Frostbrand sword. This is a particular sword that is associated with a particular person from history, and that gives it a little more gravitas. You could even give it its own history. It keeps showing up places. Didn't after it was buried with Tavish III, maybe it showed up again 30 years later someplace, and then it was lost again, and then it showed up again in the Pomarge or whatever. So you've got this history of an item that starts with this historical event, and it doesn't even have to be like magic swords and stuff like that. Just any kind of item that could be associated with a historical figure. It doesn't have to. What if it's not Tavish III's magic sword? What if it's his crown? Maybe he had a special crown made for himself, and that was buried with him. And then later on, the PCs find it in some completely unrelated place. How did it get here? We don't know. But some people will recognize it, and then that becomes a sort of historical hunt itself. You could turn, even a mundane item like that could be something that is historically grounded and could be, could give this kind of richness to the setting. It's just little things like that. And, it's not going to be for everybody. I get that. But for me, I find it much more satisfying when I can tie little things like that into the setting itself. You don't have to do it. You could make it up. It's just some crown. Okay, fine. Or it's a crown of king somebody or other who, you make up on the fly. Perfectly, doable. It's perfectly acceptable. It's not wrong. I personally just find it a lot more satisfying if I do just a little bit of digging and find something that I can hook an item into that goes into the history of the setting. And there's a wonderful a World of Greyhawk timeline that's on Greyhawk Online. I'll put a link to it below, and you can just scan through it. And you only have to go in the last 200 years of the history of the setting, and you'll find all kinds of wonderful events and things going on that you could tie into the things that are happening in your campaign right now, either by NPCs, they were present someplace, or they're or they're a descendant of somebody who was there, or whatever. Or places, there's tons of ruins and stuff that you need to figure out where these ruins came from. You can go back into the history and see, okay, what got destroyed, what got burned to the ground, things like that. And then you can tie it into items, because if an item with history makes it special, it doesn't even have to be an artifact or a relic to be special. If it has a particular provenance, a particular history, and it, and the PCs can find out about it very relatively easily, that transcends even a mundane object into something a little more special. And that's the whole point. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this one. I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Please do comment below. Hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all later. Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.